Ducks fans, are you ready? You are listening to the Ducks and Pucks podcast. This is the #1 home for Anaheim Ducks talk and analysis. Here we go.
Welcome to the show. This is your host, Mike Walters, along with my co-host, Eddie Richard, and we are back after the trade deadline to talk about all the things that the Ducks did. No, just kidding. They only didn't do really a lot. Kind of what we suspected. But we will talk about the Ducks and what they did do. And we will discuss the Ducks migration event that I went to. Pat Verbeek talked about the trade deadline and some of the summer plans coming up. So there's some stuff in there that we will kind of break down for you. And we'll go over the trade deadline in general. There were some big moves that happened, especially on Thursday and Friday. Seemed like that was when all the action was, taking place and going down. So we will get to that, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the games. Not too much. It's been kind of rough lately, as you guys have seen in some of these contests. But Eddie, how are you doing? I know, what was it, a couple shows ago, I was under the weather, and I think now you're informing me that you are a little bit under the weather.
Yeah, I think your sickness traveled through the microphones and somehow got to me, but. Yeah, I guess it's kind of my own fault. I went to Vegas this weekend on a little 4-day trip. I was feeling a little under the weather day 2 in Vegas, but it wasn't the Vegas flu. Like a sore throat and real congested, so I just started drinking more and trying to just enjoy my time in Vegas. So now I'm paying the consequences and the price for it. So yeah, and what I'm drinking now is I just took some Dayquil to get me through the show. So I apologize if I'm a little out of it or my voice sounds a little out of it, or if I'm coughing or anything like that. But looking forward to talking about the trade deadline and all the amazing stuff the Ducks did with my favorite player future considerations.
Yeah, absolutely. We had future considerations getting traded a few times, even in a minor league trade with the Goals too, after the trade deadline. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Ducks, what they did or didn't do, which we didn't really think. We talked on the last show before. We did not think that the Ducks would do a whole lot, and they didn't. The one move that we said needed to be made was Brian Dumoulin. They did end up trading him to New Jersey for a second-round pick and prospect Herman Traff, which is a very good deal. If you remember, the Ducks had gotten Dumoulin originally for a 4th-round pick, so they upgraded a pick and got this prospect Traff. The book on him, according to the prospect reports and the scouting reports, he was a big kid, 6'3", over 200 pounds, likes to hit, can move the puck, and seems like a Verbeek-esque type of player. His scoring has kind of been up and down, so we'll have to see how he pans out. But overall, whether or not he does or not, this is a trade that worked out because, as we talked about, the logjam at the blue line, that was gone. Even though momentarily, I know some people freaked out over the next trade because then the Ducks sent future considerations, his twin brother, for Oliver Shillington. Of the Islanders temporarily. Islanders a legend because he was part of the trade just prior that involved your Avs. So, they brought him in, and I know some people freaked out. They thought, they did the Dumoulin trade. They cleared up the blue line. Then they brought this guy in, but he's more of an insurance guy. Verbeek did mention that too on Duckstream, and that's what I wrote in my article about when the trade went down, is that he's in there in case somebody gets hurt or to give somebody a break, maybe in a back-to-back situation. That's kind of what it looks like. So those were the two moves that they did. Both of those were actually on Thursday, and the Ducks did not do anything on the actual trade deadline day on Friday. So, we'll dive into all the league stuff. We've got plenty of stuff to cover there, but what did you think, Eddie, about these two moves, and I guess not doing other stuff too? We can, just kind of break it all down.
I mean, there wasn't much for the Ducks to do. I think the prices were going to go sky high. I mean, we're going to go around and talk about the league trade, all the trades in a little bit. But yes, some of the trades, people are selling off a lot of their assets. And I know how crazy it gets on the actual deadline day. So I think with the Ducks' lack of doing anything, it kind of just paid off in their favor. They don't have to give up a lot of their assets. They don't have to give up any draft picks. What I wanted the Ducks to do was get that second round pick, which they didn't have this year, and also clear up that left side. Dumoulin, there was talks where they thought about like wanting to extend him, but there was no point. You have to rotate these kids in and out of the lineup. That was just getting frustrating. So it's good to clear up that left side and have them go, and each one of them can play all together. And when we talk about these few games at the end of the show, a lot of them were getting points, and they were doing kind of getting more production out of them. So that was good to see. The Shillington one kind of was like, okay, what the hell is going on? But when Verbeek went and mentioned that he's just like a depth guy, insurance. Someone gets hurt, he's there, so they don't have to call anyone up from San Diego. And then that made a lot of sense. And it's crazy. He gets traded from Colorado to Islanders, and he's just flipped over for future considerations. That kind of sucks. Like that name Shillington, I remember him back in Calgary, and he was supposed to be projected to be a really good player. And for some reason, he just had a downfall. But yeah, we'll see how that plays out. Hopefully, no injuries, or hopefully he doesn't take any playing time around from our young guys. The prospect we got, that was interesting too. Like you said, it's a Verbeek kind of guy. So who knows if he can pan out and he can just use his physical frame, be a consistent bottom six role player. And like overall, Ducks didn't lose anything significant. They got that second round pick and a prospect, and they got an insurance defenseman. So I think overall, I mean, it wasn't the most flashiest thing, but it was kind of a solid B for the Ducks, not having to give up anything. They can just take their time and wait and develop these players more and see who really wants to stick around and who doesn't. And they can go and revisit all this trade stuff come the free agency.
Yeah, exactly. And he mentioned too, I'll kind of mention this part, but I'll save most of it for later. But on the Ducks migration, he talked about trading Dumoulin, and then he also talked about Fabry. And he came out and let everybody know that Fabry has a broken bone in his hand and was going to be out at least 3 more weeks, he said. I actually did get a chance to talk to Fabry. He has kind of a soft cast on his left hand. He told me that he is week to week, so that's why he did not get traded. And I'm really curious to see how he pans out. He's the other UFA that the Ducks have at the end of the season. And I'll save the rest of that discussion for more of that summer stuff coming up. But I just wanted to throw that in there because that's why he was not traded. You also had Gibson that's been hurt. Billy Husso's been up. He actually got his first start with the Ducks. A loss, unfortunately, the other night against Utah. But as well, Gibson was not on there. Verbeek said he did take phone calls on Gibson, which, Eddie and I always talk about this. Big name players, you're going to get phone calls on them. But Verbeek said on the migration event and Duckstream that it didn't make sense. If he was going to trade him, it would have to be something that would improve the team. And he didn't feel that was the need. He actually likes the way the team is overall. So just some food for thought in there why some of the things didn't happen. I am curious with Gibson to see what's going on because, he's been out for a while now. And what's the plan? Are they going to shut him down the rest of the season? Because the way the Ducks are playing now, they've been losing games, and not just losing them. They've been close. They battled Washington till the end, which didn't really expect them to win. They barely lost on a buzzer beater game to the St. Louis Blues with McTavish, and then they lost a close one to Utah. Teams that they're trying to climb their way and get back into. But I'm really curious to see how they'll handle this situation. Obviously keeping Husso up for now. So with the injuries to Gibson, Fabry, nothing really happened. They did what we thought they needed to do. They moved out Dumoulin, and that's kind of where the Ducks sit. I'll save the rest of the discussion about the future for the summer here coming up and kind of break it more down into the league because there's some other stuff in there. There's some Ducks implications in some of these other trades as well, so we'll kind of dive into those too right now. But, we talked about Shillington coming from the Islanders. I thought this was very interesting, Eddie, because your second favorite team, the Avs, had the trade with Brock Nelson and Dolfor, and then they sent Richie and Zillington and a couple draft picks to the Islanders. Then apparently Verbeek had said at Duckstream that I don't know if he called when they were in the middle of the trade or what happened, but he had pulled Shillington out of that. There was an interview I saw too, I can't remember who it was, but they had talked to Shillington. Shillington knew about the trade between the Islanders and the Avs, but he was told that his final destination would be Anaheim. So I thought that was very funny, just kind of a weird circumstance. But what did you think about the trade between the Islanders and the Avs? your other team. I mean, did you like that? I mean, obviously the Avs are in the midst of it. They're in the battle up in the top there. What do you think about how that one kind of went down?
Well, they did give up a lot to acquire Brock Nelson, but they wanted that. I guess they wanted that bona fide second line center that they've been missing for a while since Kadri left their team. They had Middlestat, and apparently he's not that second line material that they would hope that he would be. So they end up holding on to him. And he's kind of slides in the third line. Maybe he can go to a wing. But they did give up one of their top prospects in Callium Ritchie, so that was a lot of fans were kind of weary about that. But if it helps them win a cup, then who cares? I mean, it's all worth it, right? You only have a certain amount of time when your window's open. Once that closed, then you know how it is to be like the bottom of the barrel, like us Ducks fans. But yeah, that wasn't surprising. We've been hearing about Brock Nelson to the Avs for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. Of course, they got him on Gibson, as we talked about. They're going to get calls on Zegras. That's why, when these trade deadlines come up, the top name players, they're going to get calls. And another one that came up, and Eddie mentioned this 2-3 shows ago, and multiple times, but he talked about Rantanen, and we got it confirmed from Pierre LeBrun that the Ducks did try to acquire Rantanen. So, how much were they in the race compared to the other teams? I mean, I don't know. They might not have been that much in the race. But the Ducks did check in, tried to make that move, tried to get him, and obviously it didn't work out. That was the big other name that a lot of people were watching on the trade deadline. They wanted to see what was going to happen in Carolina. Did Carolina, try to keep him? Or they, trying to make this run for the Stanley Cup with him or whatnot? They did not. And Rantanen only wanted to go to a handful of teams. He ended up going to Texas. And, I mean, Carolina made out. They got like 4 draft picks out of this and another player. I mean, I thought they did pretty well. I know you're not too happy because you had Colorado trading him to the Eastern Conference to Carolina. Then he comes back in the Central Division, Western Conference, to Texas, with the Dallas Stars. And it's like, what the hell is this? So this was a big one. I'm glad that, I don't care too much about this one. I know for you it affects you and your second team a little bit more. But I'm glad that at least the Ducks tried, I know there's no medal for trying. I know Nashville would probably hang a banner. But, it at least shows that the Ducks were in on that. They are trying to go after some other big-name players, which Verbeek did talk about at Ducks Migration. And again, we'll recap that in a little bit. But what did you think about this whole situation, Eddie? Because you talked about Rantanen when he was in Colorado and how the Ducks should be in on him back then. He ends up going to Carolina. I remember then you and I discussed it again. You said, hey, the Ducks should be in on him in the summer. And then now he ends up going to Dallas and signing that extension. So I'm really curious, like, what did you think? Because this was the other big story, leading up to the trade deadline, and he ended up not staying in Carolina.
Yeah, just to backtrack a little bit on that Middlestat thing and the Zegras in Colorado and the Ducks. This was all taking place before the trade, the Boston Bruins trade that sent Middlestat to the Bruins. So there was some discussion on bringing Zegras over there. And I'm pretty sure, as a Ducks point of view, if you're going to go after a player like Zegras, I'm pretty sure that Carolina asked for, a player like Rantanen, I'm pretty sure Carolina did ask about Zegras, and he'd be going that way too. But it's not surprising, Mike. And Zegras is a big kind of physical player. He has some speed. He knows how to put the puck in the back of the net. All stuff that the Ducks need, and kind of a player that Verbeek wants. And we all know he wants that star player to be on the Ducks. He's been trying to swing in free agency and misses. He went on and tried to acquire him at the trade deadline, which would have been hard. I think the whole thing about Carolina too, I think they dropped the ball. I think the GM made a huge rookie mistake, bringing in a player without contacting them. Apparently, you know what, too, Mike? They did try to reach out to the Avs to see if they could have any talks with them before the trade, see if they could negotiate a deal prior to that. And it just assumes that the Avalanche said no, apparently, and Carolina just took a gamble and figured that they could probably bring him over and kind of convince him to stay, which kind of backfired. So they did make out, and they did get a nice young player in return. But to trade a kind of superstar player like that in less than, 10, 12 days, that's just crazy. And I can't recall the last time that's happened at the trade deadline or near it. That's just nuts. And Rantanen, that drama didn't stop there. Apparently, he would only sign with 4 other teams, long-term extensions. That would be the Maple Leafs, the Oilers, the Dallas Stars and Florida Panthers, and obviously the Colorado Avalanche. He even mentioned to the Dallas media that his first choice was to stay in Colorado. He didn't want to leave. It kind of sucks, the whole situation, how it played out. He was offered a contract of 11.6 at 8 years in Colorado. So it's kind of crazy to think that they just couldn't get a deal done over $400K. I mean, yeah, now he has no state tax over there in Dallas, so I think he would be making a little bit more. But you would think that after all this drama, you would just think he would take the 11.6, or the Avs can kind of just move up that $400K and go ahead and get that their star player back. But I guess it worked out for the Avs. They have Natchez, and they've been doing well with Tim. He's been really I guess they're the winners over there with that trade. But I don't know. It was a weird situation. It was a lot of drama, which was good for all of us. We could just sit back and watch. And I'm really glad the Ducks were trying to go in on him. But the Kings were having a trade in place to get Rantanen as well. That would have sucked having a player like that go on the Kings, but he didn't want to sign long term. And I mentioned before on numerous shows, a lot of players, and not just the Ducks, but the Kings as well, it's hard to persuade them to come in California. You're paying a high state tax, the political climate, and the city at times, or the state, just seems like it's kind of drowning at times, and it's not a good quality of life. And I know players see that and don't want to come, especially with the Ducks, a rebuilding team. And the Kings, they're getting up there, and they're going to hit that wall too, where it's going to rebuild, so there's not really a huge future with them. I think that the Ducks have their only thing is that they have a bright future coming ahead, and once we get to that point, I think players will start doing it. Or if Verbeek wants to just do the contract we did with Toronto, then he can acquire and get other players to sign.
Yeah, that was another thing that Verbeek did. Excuse me, that Verbeek did bring up. He talked about Toronto's contract at the Ducks migration, and he said that he's going to look into that as far as going to attract free agents and even keep current players, because besides Fabry, you've still got some RFAs to look at too. One of the big ones obviously is Dostal in that mix, so they're going to have to look at that. But he's down to check in and try and figure that out. But I think you're right. I think you mentioned that Zegras, but it was actually Rantanen that the Ducks would be. That's a guy that, like, the Ducks, I think, fits more their mold as far as you said, like a big guy that can score and whatnot. Because a lot of people talk about Zegras and he's too flashy. Though it was kind of interesting. Verbeek spoke highly of him at the Ducks migration, about him playing defense, about him playing a two-way game, being suspended for 3 games, being in a fight. He said, if you would have told him that would happen at the beginning of the season, he would have said that he would have called you nuts, haha. But I think Rantanen is more of the style of player that Verbeek's looking at. So it would have been interesting if something somehow would have transpired that way, or back, like you said, it with Colorado too, prior to that. It's interesting. So, I mean, for all the criticism that some people want to point at Verbeek, it still says that he's out there. He's I know it's kind of baseball, not hockey, but he's stepping in the batter's box, taking a swing, right? Or he's going in the face-off, taking a swing at the puck. I mean, he's trying. Obviously, it didn't work out, and I agree with you. I do think that the tax situation does have a huge impact, because if I was to play hockey and or any professional sport, and I'm trying to go where I can get the most money, why wouldn't I go to Vegas? You have Nevada, no state income tax. Why wouldn't I go to Texas? Why wouldn't I go to Florida? Why wouldn't I go to Tennessee? These states that have that. So that's a little bit of an uphill battle there. And I think the one that made out in this whole thing was Carolina. They got all these draft picks. I mean, this is just crazy. To me, they were the ones that were the big winners at the trade deadline. Or at least, in terms of the whole Rantanen situation. The other one that came up too that was super last minute, and we hadn't seen too much of that this year with like the late minute trades and stuff. It was kind of like Friday at noon. It was all done. We thought Raquel was going to get moved. Another one possibly go to Carolina, but that never really came out. There was at least one report on that. But then you had Marchand going to Florida, and I thought that was a crazy one with a conditional second-round pick that can be a first-round pick depending on how many games he plays in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. But I thought that was the other big one that, really the last one, I guess, Eddie, of the trade deadline that happened on, I want to say it happened on Friday. I want to say it was like 2 or 2:30 Pacific time, because they can get the trade in by noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, but sometimes it doesn't get processed till a couple hours later. So what did you think about Marchand and that whole thing?
That was crazy. I think that was kind of the craziest thing. No one saw that coming. Like, we all heard like rumblings about Marchand being traded, being on that block, him being a UFA. But it was just crazy. It's crazy to think seeing him in a different jersey. That's just nuts, and it's kind of rare that things happen. Apparently, Boston kind of lowballed him. They only offered him like 3.6 million on I think a one or 2 year contract, and he didn't want to take that. That's just nuts to kind of lose your captain and someone that's been there since day one over a lowball offer like that. But that's nuts. I wish him the best of luck, and yeah, that's going to be the ultimate rat line over there with Kachuk, Bennett, and Marchand playing. That's going to be a fun playoffs to watch. I can't wait to watch their team. It's going to be a hard-fought battle. But, yeah, that was just nuts, and that was a kind of like you're thinking everything's winded down, and all of a sudden, boom, you have one of the analysts talk about how Raquel's going to Carolina. Like, okay, they're getting into their player back. Doesn't look as bad now losing Rantanen, but after reading other reports, I guess Raquel wasn't even close to being traded. The Pittsburgh Penguins wanted the top prospect and 2 first rounds for him, which I think is a little steep, but that's why I mentioned before how these prices go sky high and crazy, especially when it starts winding down to the wire. But yeah, Mike, I think that was one of the most surprising trades that anyone never called. I didn't see here any analysts or hear anything about him going to Florida, so that was just crazy. And what little they paid for him too, only a second round pick. That's like that's nuts, but like I said, that's going to make for a really memorable and kind of probably one of the better deadlines, or week of the deadline, with the whole Rantanen drama too. It's just that was just kind of fun as a fan to watch. I was glued on a NHL network radio on Sirius XM. That was actually fun. They had a good shows posted on there, so I was listening to that all day. But man, what a roller coaster of emotions for a lot of other fan bases.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you had Carolina, you had Dallas, you had Pittsburgh was active too. They made some trades. They traded Luke Shin to the Jets, and they got a couple picks in there. They made a trade with the Kings. They got a pick, they made another one with the Capitals. as well, getting a pick. It's in Bolivar over there. So, I mean, we knew that Pittsburgh was going to kind of do some things as well. You had Edmonton and the Sharks in the mix, even though we know the Sharks are way out of it. I mean, not that we can really talk, but, they made a mix in there too. So, I don't know if there's any other ones of the trades that you kind of want to mention or cover, and then we'll kind of talk about a little bit more about the Ducks and some of the current games and kind of the future and like what are we looking at in the summer here. But what about any of these other kind of trade deadline things that went on, or any teams you want to mention that kind of caught your eye or what they did or didn't do?
Well, since you mentioned the Senators, they did acquire Dylan Cousins from the Sabres for Josh Norris. That was a kind of a big blockbuster trade. I think Dylan Cousins has a lot of potential, and it just, for some reason, like every time Buffalo trades away one of their players, they end up going and winning the Stanley Cup eventually, or they have like breakout seasons. So he was playing really well on a bad team, so that was a good one. I feel bad for Josh Norris having to go play for the Sabres, but hopefully he'll be rejuvenated, change of scenery, and he kind of adds what they need, more of that gritty type too. So that's one of the ones I wanted to bring up that we forgot to mention. That was one of the major blockbuster trades of this deadline. And then the Kings were actively shopping too, but the Kings always make a big splash and always try to acquire the best players, which they try to go and get Rantanen, but they only brought in Kuzmenko for their playoff run. It doesn't seem like they're going to go far in the playoffs. Maybe they can surprise everyone in the first round, but I think they'll be toast after that. They should have got more. Who knows if they try to get more, but that's a kind of another noticeable trait that I wanted to talk about since they are in our same division. But I think that kind of rounds it up, Mike. I think we talked about all the big ones. You talked about how the Blackhawks retained Shea Weber. Shea Weber's still in the mix, even though he's retired. He's just finishing off his contract, which he's long-term IR. He's not going to be off of it, just like Chris Pronger did, just to still get paid. And I guess that's about it. I think Toronto, too, I went all in, bringing Scott Laughton and Brandon Carlo over there from Boston and the Flyers, respectively. So I think those are, at least that kind of rounds it up everything. It's a lot of teams just kind of went out for it and swung for the fences and to kind of is waging their future by draft picks and prospects to get this win-now mentality. It's just going to be funny when Toronto gets knocked out in the first round, though.
That's them all the time, man. It's like they pay so much money for Matthews and a few of these other guys, and they always get knocked out in like the first or second round. It's just like it's comical. But yeah, you're right. Some of them did try to go for it. Like I said, the Sharks made a little bit of a move. You had the Kings do a little bit. Yeah, you're right. The Senators with getting Cousins and Gilbert, that was kind of another big one in there too. They didn't trade my boy over there. I want a Kachuk to get moved. We talked about it the last show. Yeah, it didn't end up happening, but yeah, I felt like this trade deadline wasn't as crazy. I felt like, yeah, the Rantanen thing was a big thing, and then Marchand kind of came out of nowhere. But all these other things, I didn't really feel like it was as exciting as it had been in past years, unfortunately. I was kind of let down a little bit. I thought there might have been more, but it seemed like a lot of teams are kind of comfortable where they're at, and they kind of just hang in there and, kind of seeing what they're doing. I think part of it, too, was some did swing for the fences, like you said, and it didn't quite work out on some end. So we're kind of, going to see where they go. And, with that, it kind of leads to kind of the Ducks and what they're going to do. And I will mention our sponsor here real quick and kind of go into the second half of the show a little bit more on the Ducks. But as you know, we are part of the Hockey Podcast Network, and our sponsor for them is the DraftKings. So their latest update, basketball fans, are you ready to win some real money? Check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. When it comes to basketball payouts, DraftKings Pick 6 dunks on its rivals, including prize picks. Don't settle for a smaller payout. Switch to Pick 6 and cash in your basketball knowledge. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly, or just on a $5 entry. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 Now app. Use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to play. $5. Get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins. Only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-8797-777 or visit cpg.org. In Connecticut, must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick Six is not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer bonus award as non-withdrawals. Pick Six credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See picksix.com, DraftKings.com/promos for more information. So, I mean, with the Ducks, I think it was interesting. Some of the stuff that Verbeek had talked about, he said that, Pierre LeBrun said that he swung for the, Rantanen deal, got in on that, didn't work out. Verbeek said they were asking him, hey, what do you want in this summer? And it was funny. He talked about the Ducks defense, and he thought the Ducks defense was fine. He really wants to add a top 6 forward. Obviously going for Rantanen kind of suggests that. I thought it was interesting, that he talked about how he believes in the team, thinks that they can win, and that's why he didn't do as much, which is interesting. They also asked him about, as far as the other players, the RFAs extending him, like whether or not he'd like a bridge deal or not. And they said, yeah, he'd go more for the bridge deal, which means he would try to do more of those shorter term deals, 2-3 years for lesser amount. We mentioned earlier, talked about Vetrano trying to, make contracts like that, either to get these other big name players or to, keep people, the RFAs on the team. So it's interesting though, because, how do you feel, Eddie, especially with these recent games? Like I've said, the Ducks have been losing some games against the teams ahead of them. Vancouver, they lost. The Blues, they lost. Utah, teams that they're trying to catch. But Verbeek seemed to be big on the team at this event. It was interesting. It felt like he believed in them. I mean, it's kind of tough now. The Ducks are less than 20 games away from the end of the season. They really have to win, I hate to say it, but almost every game to even have a chance at the wild card. I think the Ducks have improved a lot. Obviously, they have more wins. They have more points than last season. But how do you feel? Like to me, I feel like they still need to add some stuff to try to get them over the hump next season. I feel like, yes, this team can come back next year and be good and be better, but I still feel like there's some pieces missing to this puzzle.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And those pieces weren't addressed at the trade deadline at all. So I'm not surprised. I'm glad the Ducks are still fighting and staying in it. I'm glad that in some of these games we see them play. You see what Verbeek is talking about, how he has faith in these guys. But if he's really being dead serious, that he has faith in this team to make the wild card spot and to do some damage in the playoffs, maybe it's time for him to go, or maybe he should go scout for another team or something. But because there's no way this team is even close to being that style of play. I still think they're too soft, Mike. You have to battle. You have to really grind. And I'm not talking about dropping the gloves and fighting everybody. No, but you have to get in those dirty areas. You got to win board battles. You got to get in front of the net, take the punishment to get a goal, and then do things like that. And sometimes the Ducks, they shy away from that. I mean, your goalie gets hit numerous times. Your goalie gets injured, and no one stands up for him, really. You have to have Gudis go and do it finally. It's just things like that, those small things he has to add. You have to get bigger. You have to get tougher and stronger. You have to really find yourself and dig deep to even go for that role. I think for the West, I think we can say the playoffs are a little set. Minus, I think the St. Louis Blues have a chance to make it over Calgary. I think Vancouver's cooked and they're done. I've said this numerous shows before. They even traded JT Miller. I mentioned that, but I think it was you mentioned too how the trade deadline wasn't as active. I think a lot of it had to do with that. If you go look down at the Eastern Conference standings, there's about like 5 or 6 teams that are close to making a wild card spot, and it can go either way. So I think a lot of those teams were holding on to their assets, and they wanted to try to kind of buy and get them over that hump to make the playoffs. So it's still going a battle over there, which I think right now with the West it's kind of penciled in who's going to make it and who's not. And the Ducks had some games that they should have won, especially that one against Vancouver was a big important one, and they dropped it. I just can't see this team even getting close to a wild card spot, especially without adding the pieces that they actually needed to get them over that hump. At this point, since we're not going to make it, I just want them to stay kind of in the bottom 10 to get that at least that 10, that number 1 through 10 draft pick. If they had to drop lower, which is unfortunate to say, then I mean I'll take that too at this point. As long as they keep improving too, we have seen improvement, but as of now, I think it's kind of a tap out time. I guess the season's over, even though you're only like 7 points out. Those are a long 7 or big 7 points at this time frame. Everyone's going to be leveling up their game. Everyone wants to get in. You have teams that want to maintain wherever they are. So no one's going to go and have those off games. Those teams are going to gear up for playoffs and play that playoff mentality hockey moving forward.
Yeah, and you mentioned playing those teams that were ahead of them. Looking at the schedule in March, I mean they're playing teams that it's not. I mean they got to win, but they're not really any big games left in March other than they're going to play St. Louis one more time in the mix there. And then you look at April, they've got Calgary twice and Vancouver. So, I mean, yeah, you got 4 more games there against guys that, that are battling that you're going to want to try to beat. But, looking at most of these games, I mean, you got San Jose who's out of it. Edmonton's already in it. Colorado. I mean, there's not a lot of games against those teams that, right there, other than Calgary. Yeah, they're going to play Calgary twice. I mean, if they can somehow climb in there. But the Ducks have been hanging out now around 7 to 9 points out of the playoff spots, kind of where they've been, and a lot of missed opportunities. I mean, they did play better. I really thought that Blues game they were going to pull it out. McTavish scored at the very end of the game, but the buzzer had gone on before that. They ended up losing. Utah, they were down 2-0. They came back in Husso's debut, tied it up, but then a late power play goal sent them under, which that was rough because the Ducks had played Washington the night before, battled them hard. I felt like there were some calls that went against the Ducks in the third period where they could have had some power plays. May or may not have helped them in the outcome of that game, but then apparently they got on a flight right after that game and flew to Utah and got into the hotel at like 3 a.m. They were talking about that on DuckStream, and I don't know what time they crashed and woke up, but when they played in that game at the beginning of Utah, they were super sluggish in the beginning. You could tell. They were able to switch up the lines, a little credit to Cronin there, and they came back and tied it up 2-2, but ended up losing that one 3-2, another game that they really needed to win. So, to me, I'm with you, Eddie. I really think that the Ducks season is done. I just don't see it anymore. I don't see them making it. And like you were talking about, I'm not a big person about team tank and all that stuff, as a lot of people talked about, but I'm with you. I want them to kind of stay towards that higher, pick area to see if they can still get like a top 10 pick, because at this point, I don't know. It just doesn't look good. The odds are like super slim for them to make it. And then, if they do get in there for some chance, because I know some people are still talking about playoffs and everything, if they're able to, get past Calgary or Vancouver, St. Louis, Utah. So you got these 4 teams, at least they got to jump. Minnesota's way up there, and they're not going to catch Minnesota. I mean, you're looking at playing most likely the Knights or Edmonton is where you're at in this mix. I mean, it's gonna be tough, or depending on who the other wild card is and how it worked out. It doesn't matter. Whoever they get under play. I mean, the Kings too. You got Vegas, Edmonton, and LA up there. The Ducks aren't going to beat any one of those teams in a 7-game series. I'm sorry, they're just not. I mean, let's be realistic. Vegas has dominated us all season. Edmonton, we've had a few flashes of decent games against them, but that would be rough. And then LA too. LA, I feel like every time we play them, it's a low scoring game, and then. We've prevailed before, but it seems like most of the time, we're not. But it's going to be tough, and for them to make it, get in there, get bounced out, and get a lower pick for this season, it's not worth it to me. I'd rather see them. I still want to see them play well, obviously, and they have been playing competitive games. Don't get me wrong; they've not been getting blown out these games that we remember last season. Holy crap, they were losing like Toronto giving up 7, 8, 9 goals or whatever it was in other games like that. So we're not seeing that. The games are competitive. They're in it till the end. Even the Capitals, I did not expect them to win that game, and it was 4-4. With like 10 minutes to go. I mean, they almost were able to scratch out a point in that game. They even kept Ovechkin off the board. He didn't score, even though he did get 3 assists. And he had an empty net goal, which he decided to give up to his teammate so that he could get the other player could get the hat trick. But the Ducks have been more competitive. I like that the 5-on-5 play has seemed to be better. Granted, a lot of that is because of Dostal and Gibson. The big thing for me in the offseason going in is that the Ducks do need to get more offense going. But they've got to work on their special teams. Their special teams have been god-awful. And we had some people asking questions about that, too. We had, let's see. We had another one in here. I can't remember, but we had someone on Instagram ask, hey, what about the special team coach and what should we do with him? It was, hey, it's Chris. He asked, hey, should we get a more competent power play coach? Yeah, you may need to do that. We've had other people ask. I had Brewski asked, is Cronin coming back next season? Which has obviously been a question of, that all of you are asking. I think Eddie and I talked about that, and we said that we thought he would not come back. But the way the Ducks have been playing now, I don't think they are going to get rid of Cronin. So I would say go out there and get a top 6 scorer if you can. Maybe you do get another coach to come in and do the power play, and you got to work on the special teams, because the special teams play has been in the bottom of the league, and it's been a huge problem. It's been a big downfall for the Ducks for most of the games this season. So kind of covered a lot there, Eddie, but what are your thoughts on the summer and improving and what the Ducks need to do?
Yeah, I mean, if they could squeak in that second wild card spot, they have to play the Winnipeg Jets. I wouldn't mind seeing that. Imagine they just sweep them the first round. It could happen. It really could happen. But we all seen what the Blue Jackets did to the President's Trophy Tampa Bay Lightning years ago. No one thought they would ever. You know what? When they beat Tampa Bay that first game, it screwed up everyone's bracket. That the NHL had to redo all the brackets because everyone was screwed. Like, no one could believe that, and they ended up beating them, and they swept them. I know one of those games went to 2, 3. I think it went to almost 5 overtimes. It was just nuts. You never know what could happen. But then reality hit the Blue Jackets because they weren't that deep of a team, and they had other teams ready to go and ready to that fight mentality. I think the Tampa Bay Lightning in that series just got too complacent. I think that's what would happen with the Jets. And yeah, that'd be cool to see, to actually go watch a playoff game. But like I said, Mike, at this point, I guess we can call the season done and just kind of hope for the best possible draft pick that we can get, or hopefully the hockey gods will do us a favor and we can steal up and move up some spots. Like you never know. Well, unless it's already written in stone by the league. But like you said, the special teams are horrible. Power plays have been an issue. I can't recall the last time the Ducks actually had a solid power play and that were actually not near the bottom of the standings on their power play time. I think that needs to be addressed, and that's one of the main problems. I don't know what the Ducks need to do. The Ducks team, they like to hold on to the puck longer than they should, and especially when there's that one point where you're like a 14-15 game where you haven't scored a power play goal, and you're sitting there just passing back and forth. At that point, just shoot the damn puck, and hopefully it bounces off someone. You get a lucky bounce, catch the goalie off guard, he blinks an eye, he doesn't see the puck, and it goes in. But something has to go with that. As far as Cronin leaving, I don't think he leaves next season. I know he's hard, and a lot of people really put him down because he's a tough coach. I don't know if he's changing his style. He's still a brand new hockey head coach in the NHL. So maybe he's just swapping things up a little bit and kind of knowing how to talk to certain players a different way to get them to kind of react. You never know, because we've seen Zegras' game significantly improve. His two-way game. He's a little more aggressive. That's crazy how he's sticking up for his teammates, which I don't like to see one of your top players do that. He drops the gloves of Garland, and you see all that, and you see those things in the making from Zegras, and I know that has to do with coaching and not just the player himself. So I think he remains the Ducks coach for one more season, and if something happens next season, the Ducks aren't trending upward like they have been the last 2 seasons, because every season that you have a little bit of improvement, it's kind of baby steps. I think this season they made kind of a significant step in improvement than last season. But I think as long as the Ducks keep trending upward, we can still see them behind the bench.
Yeah, that's what I think too. I mean, it seemed like the Fire Cronin thing kind of went away for a while, and now they've been losing some games. It's come back a little bit on social media, but I don't see him going anywhere. I think the bigger thing is to address special teams. I would try to get a top 6 scoring forward, especially one that scores on the power play. I absolutely think they need to do that. If you've got Zellweger a quarterbacking on the power play. You've had this 5 forward thing that's gone on a little bit here too at the power play, and you've had Zegras doing that too. I'm good with that. If they want to bring in another guy to quarterback the power play, whether he's a forward or a defenseman, I'm good with that as well. And that's kind of what I see that I think that they need. There's been questions about Gudas. I know you were kind of tough on Gudas. I think the last couple shows, but we had the Mighty Jerseys and D Press 08. They asked about, should Gudas still be the captain? Should Gudas be traded? Is some of the things that have been brought up. And, this one is kind of a tough one because I get a little bit more, I guess, emotional on this one. We talk about my better half and how she's a big Gudas fan too. But, he hasn't looked great in some of these games recently. And I think him being the captain, I don't think that's going to change. Should it change? We've talked about that. We've talked about, if McTavish or Terry or one of those guys was someone, the younger kids that was going to come in. And I still think that's a possibility. I don't see Gudas being a long-term captain. I really don't. I see him being a transitional captain and one of these other guys coming up. Or if the Ducks do go big and they go get someone, like a blockbuster trade, like we joked about. I don't know. I joked about Kachuk, but they talk about Rantanen or one of these other guys out there that they want to try and pick up in the summer and make that guy the captain and maybe make Gudas an A. I could see something like that, but I think that they won't do it because they already made the decision. They put him in there. I don't see them changing him from captain at least till another season. It's kind of how I look at it. Almost the same kind of situation like you said with Cronin. The Ducks have been trending upward. They've got more wins. They've got more points. They're doing better. They're not getting blown out in games. Yes, the special teams is terrible. We've talked about that on the show and previous shows. But as far as that fan question goes, I don't see that. I don't see them, unless it's a blockbuster trade involving Gudas. I see Gudas as being the captain, Cronin being the coach. But I do think that they can bring in a top 6 forward. We had Dizzy Alday ask that, is Verbeek actually capable of doing it? I think he is. I mean, he did try for Stamkos and Marshall Show before. Yes, they went to Tennessee. We've talked about the battle with the no tax states versus the tax states and all that kind of thing. But I think that's the deal. I think you maybe bring in another coach for the power play. You try to get somebody else that can score, which I think that's been kind of the biggest disappointment with this team this season has been the scoring, Eddie, because, I was thinking about this the other day with the Ducks, and we were so big on this team in the beginning of the season. We really thought that there would be, a bunch of guys that would be 20 goal scorers. And they don't have that. But Toronto just finally got his 20th goal. It's his 3rd season in a row. But we really thought that the Ducks would have 5 or 6 20-goal scorers, and they're not going to have that. So, I mean, that's the frustrating part for me. I mean, yes, Zegras has been hurt. Zegras has been out. But I feel like the Ducks, that's been a killer for them too. Scoring goals, they've been one of the lowest in the league, and they really need to turn that around. And so for me, getting that top 6 scoring forward is going to be huge. I do like Colangelo and what he's done. He had 5 goals in 4 games. Him, Gauthier, McTavish has been killing it. I call them the GMC line, but I guess they prefer to be called the Kid line, so that's the name they want to go by. But I could see the Ducks letting Fabry go, keeping Colangelo up there, probably making the team next season, which Verbeek did talk about some of the other players coming up to play. He talked about Ian Moore joining the team after his college time is up this season. Probably San Diego first, But that's what I'm looking at is like, trying to get that scoring going. I think that's a huge part of this puzzle for the Ducks. You've got these two goalies that have been killing it, keeping the defense alive and the 5-on-5 play alive, but the scoring and the special teams has been killing this team, Eddie.
Oh yeah, definitely. And we had some we did have some bright ones. You mentioned defense. Jackson Lacombe, he's been playing lights out. He just took that next step and really good. I love what I've seen him on the back end. He just does everything you want in a defenseman, including points, quarterbacking the power play at times. He gets in those dirty areas. He gets in the mix. I like what I see from there. Yeah, I know we're hard on Gudas, but I just, like I said, Gudas is trying to be a player that he's not, it seemed like, and that's what got me frustrated. But you know what? After that podcast, Mike, what did he do? He went and jumped in and had his teammates back a couple times. So he stepped up a little bit. So that was good to see. As far as adding a top six, that's going to be hard, especially come free agency. I mentioned, like, players have issues coming to California. They have teams like the Florida teams, like Vegas, Nashville, Dallas, all no state tax. That's more money for them. I mentioned Shesterkin. He makes, 12.5, but he's only getting about 8 something, maybe 9 million of that, which is still a shit ton of money. But he has his agent fees. He has a lot of the New York state tax he has to pay. And a lot of players look into that and whatever is going to financially help them better. And they want to be part of a winning product. And there's some names out there that I can see Verbeek going for in free agency. I know Marner is going to be a UFA. And he's rumored to command a lot of money. He almost got traded to Carolina too, but he nixed the trade. He has a no movement clause. Toronto was in a trade for Mikko Rantanen. That would have been a big one too, them getting him. But he didn't want to go. So now that tells me to believe, like, hey, so what's going to happen with him? Are the Maple Leafs going to re-sign him? Does he have like that kind of bad taste in his mouth, knowing that they're going to trade him? That he's supposed to be one of the core guys. He could be looking for a deal. He's going to want probably a little bit more money than he's worth, and the Ducks can afford to bring in that player. He has 80 points already. He can kind of make other players around him a little better, and hopefully generate more 20-goal scorers on our team besides the one we have and the two we're probably going to have in Terry and McTavish if they don't just go a cold streak. There's other players too, which we'll dive into once that time comes closer, because there's a few guys on the list I can see Verbeek going and trying to acquire that can help the Ducks. Like I said, it's going to take more money, and if he's willing to kind of pay them, I guess, like, backload the contract, so when they do change teams or retire, they can have go live somewhere with the lower state tax and have to pay that, just like that baseball one and the one Vetrano has. So that's going to be in the Ducks' favor. I hope Verbeek really utilizes that until the next CBA, where they put a stop to that, because I know the league was pissed and they hate kind of things like that. But it's going to be interesting to come free agency and what happens. Number one thing is just getting some kind of change in the special teams, because that significantly needs to improve if you want to ever have success in anything in playing this league.
Yeah, exactly. And, we threw this question out to you guys too, the fans on Facebook. Like, which player would you like to see play for the Ducks? Of course, you all know I said Kachuk, and everybody laughed. But right, and that was a dream. But some of them mentioned Marner, like you talked about, Eddie. Was a name on there. I'm kind of going through the list here, looking.
Sam Bennett would be mine. Like, Sam Bennett is a player that I would like on the Ducks, and I think that's a kind of a Verbeek type of player. Brings that physicality, can score, will stick up for his teammates. It's kind of an asshole to play against.
Yeah, no, I like that too. Some of these other ones, and these are obviously a dream. They talked about Draisaitl, Tage Thompson, McKinnon, McDavid. I mean, some of these names are not necessarily, ones. They talked about Jeff Skinner as another name that was thrown out there. Duchesne. But I just wanted to throw that out there because I know we do those podcast poll questions and some of the players that you guys throw out there, and it was just wide open. It was just a very vague, like, hey, who would you want on the team? Not that they would realistically make it, but I want to see what the Ducks are going to do, because they're still going to be below the cap. That the cap is going to go up. They've got plenty of room. Yeah, they have these RFAs that they've got to try to figure out to see what they want to do. But I mean, the situation for the Ducks isn't that bad. I mean, they've got, if they don't bring back Fabry, that's a big chunk of money right there for you. Looking over, you've got also Brock McGinn we talked about, who's sadly going to be out for a while, but obviously not going to cost as much. But if you don't bring back Fabry, that's $4 million there that you don't have to worry about. You're looking at your forwards. You've got Isaac Lundestrom at $1.5 million. You've got Brett Leeson at $1 million. Colangelo is just under $1 million. McTavish, I'm really curious to see too. He's just under $1 million. So you've got, obviously McTavish is going to get a raise. The other guys probably not so much. Defense, you have Drew Hellison is the RFA, also just under $1 million, which obviously he stepped up his game. Eddie did mention Lacombe, who's really stepped up his game. He's not an RFA till the following season, so that's when they'll have to deal with that.
I would get him locked up after this season because I know how players are, and you can see he's not slowing down at all. He's just going to have a monstrous season next season, especially when the Ducks are a little better. And he's going to command even more money. So if they can lock him down to an extension on July 1st or after when he could sign the extension, I think that'd be beneficial to them.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, Eddie. I would do that too. You get him locked up. You've still got Minchikov and Zellweger that are RFAs until the 2026-27 season. And then you've got Gudis and Trouba who are UFAs at that time too as well. So, you're still fine there on defense. And then in goalie situation, you have Dostal, that's the RFA. Obviously, he should be getting a huge raise as well. Gibson's still on there through the 2026-27 season. So it's not dire. I mean, they don't have, Dostal, McTavish are kind of really your big RFAs that you need to look at. The Ducks still have plenty of money. I mean, they're going to be fine. And like I said, you have Fabry come off the books. They're talking about the projected cap space, at least right now on Puckpedia, is $16 million, and that'll go up with the cap as well. It'll be closer to $20 million. So they've got room to do stuff. And and McGinn, I forgot too. He's almost $3 million. So if they don't bring him back, so between him and Fabry, you're looking at close to $7 million there coming off. So now right there, you're looking at about $23 million. Plus the cap going up, the Ducks are in a really good position to take a swing at the fences and try to get a free agent for a ton of money if they want to. I mean, there's no excuse this summer to try to do that. And I think that's what we really have to look at. The rest of the season to us is kind of academic. Yes, the Ducks could make a push. They could win most of the games, but like I said, they're not playing a lot of the teams ahead of them that they could catch. They're playing a lot of teams that are either out of the playoffs or already pretty much in. So it really, summertime is what we'd have to see with this team. And I'm curious to see what will happen with Gibson over the summertime as well. He's not been healthy. He's been hurt, not playing lately. I'm really curious. It seems like they're keeping us all in the dark on that, which is it's kind of the norm for the NHL. It's upper body, lower body injury and whatnot. But that's where I'm at with this team. I do think they're going to improve next season, but there's a couple more things they need to work on. The big thing is getting the offense going. The Ducks are towards the bottom of the league in scoring goals. They're toward the bottom of the league in special teams. You've got to turn those around. They've been relying on the goalies so much this season, which is great, and the Ducks do have two awesome goalies that have been up there in the top 5 in the league. But that's only going to get you so far. You got to get all these other pieces put together for this puzzle to make them a contending team next season. Any other kind of final thoughts, Eddie, about this as we kind of wrap up here?
Yeah, well, Cronin said it. Gibson has this lingering injury or whatever's going on. So I guess he wasn't wrong. He wasn't lying to us. He was telling us the truth. And I'm curious to see what's going on with them. And at this point, do you just shut him down, let him fully recover, and get ready for the next season? I don't think there's any point in putting him in games where he's going to get consistently hurt. We have I don't think Husso played bad on his Ducks debut. He had the 39 the 3 goals allowed
Yeah, 39 shots against.
Yeah, so yeah, he didn't do that bad. He kept the Ducks in the game. I mean, we all know he had a bad track record when he played in Detroit, but it seems like, I guess, a kind of a lower defense in front of him it caused him to step up, or maybe he just wants to earn his spot back. Maybe just ride with that 1-2 punch going through the end of the season. We can get a good look at Husso and see if it can be a good backup for Doss come next season, and boom, you can trade Gibson when he's fully healthy and get a nice little haul for him, especially if these teams that are projected to win the Stanley Cup, or these Canadian teams that have that fan base that will just absolutely burn down their arena if they don't get past a certain hump. Maybe it's time for them to go and kind of overpay in the offseason and get someone like Gibson that can hopefully prove to stay healthy and give them a chance to win the Stanley Cup. So we do have some options. We're going to have a lot of cap space to play with next season, so that's going to be good. You forgot to mention Drumlin comes off the books. That's another $1.5 million that we have off, and you can use that too. So yeah, like you said, we do have options going forward, and we just have to keep our heads held high. There's a significant improvement from this season to last season, so that's good. So we have our draft picks still. We're going to have high draft picks because of the standings that we're in. So there is some hope. I'm just curious to see and what you think, Mike, of McTavish and Doss. What do you see their contracts being?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you're looking at Dostal and the way he's been playing and where he's at. I could see his contract being at least, I mean, depending on the term, how far they want to go out, I could see Dostal getting at least $5 million. At least. Yeah, I mean, if Verbeek wants to do those bridge deals like he's talking about, I could see him doing that. I mean, you look at a guy. Let's see. If you look at a guy like Zegras, he's at $5.75 million until 2026. I could see him doing somewhere between in the mid to high fives for Dostal for 2 or 3 years. Now, if he wants him to be the guy, right? And we talked about trading Gibson. Then maybe he does offer him a 6-7 year deal at around $6 million. I mean, Gibson got 6.4 for that long term one. So I think that's the key is really how long is the term. I think, to me, I would lock him up. I would try and lock up Dostal in the high fives for 5 or 6 years. That's what I would try to do. If you got to go into the sixes, I'm okay with that, because you're probably going to trade Gibson, or you're just, at the end of 2026, you're done, or whatever. I don't know. There's so many question marks with Gibson and his health and his injury, and nobody wants to really talk about it. So I like Dostal. I think you pay the man, even if you go over 6, and you try and lock him down for 5 or 6 years. That's how big I feel about him. I mean, he's just been fantastic this season. And I'm with you. Maybe you just shut down Gibson the rest of the season. The Ducks only have 2 more back-to-back scenarios in April. Dostal can play most of the games and ride it out the rest of the season, and that's what I would do. And Husso, yeah, they brought him as a UFA, $4.75 million. That's another one that could come off the books too. Depends on maybe what happens here. Maybe they do try to bring him back if they trade Gibson in the summertime. So that's the big thing too, is the question mark in net. We know Dostal is going to get a new deal. Verbeek specifically talked about that at the Ducks migration event. The question is just going to be how long and how much. He's definitely coming back. So then you figure out what are you doing with Gibson? Is he going to be, because to me, Dostal is the number one goalie. Yeah, I mean, that's it. He is the leading goalie for the Ducks. It's not just number one on his jersey. He's the number one goalie. So that's what I would look to see. You mentioned McTavish, slow start to the season, but then picked it up. I could see McTavish, the way he's been playing, and he keeps it going. I could see him in the $4 to $5 million range. And I think with him, it would be more of a bridge deal, more of the traditional bridge deal. 2 to 3 years, $4 to $5 million is what I'm kind of looking at. What do you think, Eddie?
Oh, I agree. I couldn't agree more. I think you want to keep that number as close to 5 or a little under 5 as possible, and I think that's a fair deal for him. 2 or 3 years. Let's see he can go and prove himself. I'm not a fan of some of these teams will to right away go and give a player and gamble on what they think they're going to become and give them like a 6.77 million times 7 times 8 and just kind of hope it pays off. But no, I think anywhere 4.5 million is fair. A little bit over 5.5, maybe an overpay at this point in his career. Now, if he had a season if he played how he played the second half of the season, then we're talking about different numbers here. He has showed significant improvement in his game. I don't know if he was dealing with some kind of injury or something nagging on him prior to that, but he's been playing really well, some great hockey, and he's going to get paid too. And he's still young. He's only 22 years old, so he could do that 2 to 3 year bridge deal, gamble on himself, and really take him to the bank come his next contract. But yeah, I think that's going to be a little more easier to get done than it is Dostal. And the question is too: is he going to want to just sit there and have to share games with Gibson, or is it going to come to the point where he tells manager like, yeah, I want to sign long term, I want to sign for this term, I want to be part of this team's future, but I don't want to be rotating between 1 and 2 or being that backup because you're so stuck on Gibson or having to split games. No, I want to be the man. I want to be the number one goalie playing most of these games and having to share that role. So I wonder if that's going to play a factor too if him and his agent go and mention that to Ducks management. And we've seen it too more frequently in the last few seasons how players aren't afraid to like things aren't working out or they want more playing time, them requesting a trade. The Nashville goalie, Arkansas, whatever his name, I can't think of his name right now, but their prize prospect, he went and requested a trade because he was just kind of shipping back down to the AHL, and he had other goalies in front of him that he wasn't going to get a shot for a few more years, especially they locked up Saros for a big deal, and he went ahead and said if him being a rookie in the league that he wants to trade. So players aren't afraid to go and speak their minds and try to kind of be dealt to a place they can have more success.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Dostal would be fine playing, riding that horse and being number one, and then you have your backup if it's Husso or whoever else after that. So that's I think the biggest thing with the roster is I don't see too much. There's not a lot of RFAs. There's not a lot of decisions to make outside of the goalie situation. So that's what I'm really curious to monitor for the season. Kind of with that, we'll wrap up the show. There's not too much left, right? There's a couple weeks left in the season. We'll obviously definitely have a show wrapping up the season and diving more into this. We'll have shows talking about the draft, of course. We'll talk more about free agency. So this may be the last one for a few weeks, just depending on if anything earth-shattering or something comes up. So we appreciate the support. Also, don't forget we're part of Old City Sports Network as well. Check the description box. There are discounts in there, OCSN, for getting most of those deals as well. And thanks for all the support. Also, if you missed the Ducks migration event, I did transcribe that whole event in an article again. You can go check that out as well on DucksNPucks.com, the Ducks migration event. It's all in there, breaking it all down. So with that, from Eddie and I, we appreciate your support, and let's go Ducks.